S&P from the Historic Wall Center. Jeff Marek hosts The Sheet weekdays at noon Pacific time. He joins us on Fridays. And
welcome to our hellscape.
I was wondering how you were going to come in. I'm like, okay, and then Blake right over the top. Yeah, welcome to our hellscape. Yeah, you got a log you want to throw on the fire here? What do you got, Marek?
I cannot remember integrating a weekly guest into the show during a busier and more high-pitched period in Canucks history. So we're glad to have you along here for all of this,
I'm happy to
Jeff.
be here. I'm happy to be here.
You're a good encyclopedia. Let's start. Does this remind you of anything?
God.
Because I've racked my brain for recent history. Like,
he's told us about Gainey and Savard over the weeks.
But not that. Not just the feud part.
Yeah.
Just like the melting down. Like the Nylander must go rhetoric, and now Mark. Like, is it anywhere close? Is anybody?
No, Toronto ain't got nothing on this, man.
Like, this is.
Hang on a second here. I'll take, and you guys will appreciate this one. I'll take it off the hockey space and stick it in the baseball space.
Okay.
You remember when the Blue Jays collapsed, when they had to win one game? Was it one game out of 7 down the stretch? And it's like, oh, don't worry. And the Tigers just piled it up and piled it on the, what was that, 80? Was that 83?
86?
And then they finally,
87,
was it 86?
I believe. Frank Tanana over Jimmy T.
There it is.
Nothing.
I knew you would
have
have
the final game of the season on a wall-scraping home run from Chet Lemon to left.
I think in the penultimate game, Manny Lee did a Bill Buckner through his legs that allowed a winning run.
Something like that. I want to say they lost their last 9, got swept by the Tigers, went to Milwaukee, got swept, and then went back to Detroit and got swept.
And I like the comparison, except for the fact this isn't late in the season. So, like, that's the funny thing is there's runway left here, Jeff, and yet people look down the runway and all they see is more fire and charred, and like, it just doesn't look good.
More than ever, and this season really cements it for a few teams, and perhaps most notably the Vancouver Canucks. When you're a Canadian hockey team in the NHL, there's no such thing as an 82-game season. It's 82 one-game seasons. That's what it is, and that's what it must feel like. You guys are in Vancouver. I'm not. That's what it must feel like in Vancouver. After every game, it's like a season's worth of audits on what's happening. Now, this has been a particularly bad week, as you guys well know, for the Vancouver Canucks, the pasting by the Jets, and then what happened last night against the Los Angeles Kings, which was flat out disastrous. Although we really do need to give the Kings a lot of credit here for the season that they're having, and a couple of players specifically who don't get accolades, Vladislav Gavrikov and Mikey Anderson. You know, outside of Siegenthaler and Kovacevic in New Jersey, they may be the best shutdown pair in the entire NHL. Like, they've lost Drew Doughty, and it's still an Olympic diver into water without ripple. Like, it has been, what they've been able to do is remarkable, but this feels really bad. I can imagine for a Vancouver Canucks fan. And again, this is just like every game is like a full season audit, but all these audits are piling up. And right now it does feel very much like, again, I'm an outsider on this one. I'm provinces away, but it must feel for a Vancouver Canucks fan like they need to do something now. Mm-hmm. We can't keep saying, you know what, the rest of the division, the rest of the conference is clunky. We can skate backwards into a playoff spot. It must not feel that way anymore for the Vancouver Canucks. And here we were last week talking about that.
I've been saying a 4-game win streak solves it. Like, the math is not terrible still for the Canucks. If they won 4 in a row, like, they'd be totally fine, but it's just, that doesn't seem likely.
So the question becomes, did they have to move JT Miller sooner rather than later?
Pretty obvious he's checked out. That's what it looks like to me. Mm-hmm. I think that's what it looks like to everybody. We can all be blunt about it. We're all grown-ups. It looks like he's checked out. It's looked like he's called it a day, and he's just, he's like just, winding your wristwatch on the way to the gallows. Like, okay, we know this is coming. He knows this is coming, perhaps, and he's behaving as if it's an inevitability. So I think, again, like everybody knows this. Everyone knows it around the NHL, so you're probably not going to get the best possible deal for JT Miller. But there is, I think, value in managers who understand that cap space is a thing, and cap space is a commodity, and we need to stop looking at players going for quote unquote losing trades, even though you gain cap space. Cap space is a valuable commodity in the NHL, more valuable than ever. And now it's going up and it's going to become more of a luxury item, I think, for a lot of teams. But I think that right now you might be looking at, if you're Jim Rutherford and Patrick Galvin, going into a situation where you say, okay, we know we're going to quote unquote lose this trade. Let's just try to mitigate the damage. Because it's being damaged, it's being done every single game with this lineup and the sidebar that's come along all with it. And now it's his name trends during every game, and the highlights come out of the straight leg back checks, and we all saw what happened in the defensive zone yesterday when he sort of spun in circles on the Turcotte goal, the 2-0 goal. Yeah. I think we all know where this is headed. I think it's up to Vancouver now, probably just to say, look, it's time to pull the Band-Aid off. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah,
that's what it feels like to me.
Cap space matters. Chemistry matters too, right? You hope that you can make it up with guys coming together in the short term before you're able to spend that cap space, and who knows what could be coming back. We have talked about the Rangers and his two quote-unquote home markets, Pittsburgh and Columbus, as an Eastern Ohio guy.
Yeah.
What about New Jersey? And what about Simon Nemec? We have
it's interesting.
I think it was Kyprios who said, don't underestimate New Jersey and JT Miller. Yeah. Very much looks like New Jersey is going to go for a cup here. And Nemec, the second overall pick from a couple of years ago, was telling Slovakian reporters this week that he's on the verge of a trade request.
And I understand how Simon Nemec feels here, right? Like, he's looking at everybody around him in his draft class, and everyone's playing games. And he's already had a season where he played 60 games in the National Hockey League, and now he's down in the AHL saying, how did this happen? How did this get here? But the problem is, no one saw Jonathan Kovacevic playing this well. And that should probably be his spot. But as I mentioned off the top, like Kovacevic and Siegenthaler have probably been the best shutdown pair in the entire NHL. He just can't find a spot right now. I guess it's a real luxury to have if you're Tom Fitzgerald. We've got this like stud defenseman we can't find a spot for on the NHL side of things. So a couple of things. One, I think that the New Jersey Devils probably are looking for a player who's a little bit more aggressive. I know Timo Meier is a real solid power forward. Stefan Nason can fill that role as well. And he's having when we talk about most improved players around the NHL, Nason should probably be in that conversation. But if you're planning on having any type of long playoff run, you probably want more robust players as well. One of the criticisms of the New Jersey Devils is, can you win with two centers at that size? Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes aren't exactly twin towers here by any stretch, and they're two of the best players in the NHL. Hischier's always in the conversation for the Selke Trophy, and Jack Hughes tends to be in and around the Harts, and many people look at him and say, like, what, one day we could see this guy winning an Art Ross. So it would make some sense to me if you believe that Nemec can step in right away and play with the Vancouver Canucks and be productive. I tend to not want to make my mind up about defensemen in the NHL until they play at least 100 games. And then I say, like, okay, now we have a sense of, okay, who this player is and who he's going to become. And he was trending that way a couple of years ago when he was playing that 60 games with the New Jersey Devils. Philosophically, it does make sense, and I could see New York wanting, or the New Jersey Devils wanting to be more aggressive. And I'll tell you why. I'm just sort of talking my way through this here. If you look at some of the more recent games that New Jersey has played, there are the games against the New York Rangers, which are always rough. Those are tough games. But then as well, if you look at that home and home they had a couple of weeks ago against the Carolina Hurricanes, you say to yourself, you know what? That was really awesome hockey and snarly hockey as well. Maybe we want 7 games of that. And then you look at how they most recently played against the Florida Panthers. And if you think that these are some of the teams you're going up against in the playoffs, specifically the Florida Panthers, like if you have sights to make it to the Stanley Cup final, that road's going to go through the Cats. And you'll probably want more players like JT Miller in a series like that. So I'm, in a way here, talking my way into this trade based on how we've seen the New Jersey Devils play and what they need. I'll throw a couple of other names out at you.
Before we leave this one, let's just go conceptually, because I've started to wrap my head around the fact, like, do the Canucks just need to accept not almost anything, but like I don't think 3 weeks ago people would say, okay, if you're trading JT Miller straight up for Nemec is not you need Nemec plus.
Yeah.
I wonder if Nemec just Miller for Nemec, and obviously I haven't looked at New Jersey's cap. I don't know if they need cap to go the other way, but just in terms of quality, I don't know that you can be too choosy at this point.
Nemec is an elite level prospect. Make no mistake about it. That guy's a second overall pick for a reason. Like that guy's stepping into most lineups. It's just outside. Like he's not stepping into Vegas's lineup, for example. Like there's no room at the end there. He's not, obviously, unfortunately for him, he can't step into New Jersey's lineup because their back end, barring injury, it's a barrier to entry. He just can't get in. I do think it would need to be plus. Because I don't think that you're just doing Simon Nemec, because again, and I always come back to this idea, players exist in two states, potential and actual. JT Miller is in his state of actuality, and Simon Nemec is still in a state of potentiality. And if you're the Vancouver Canucks, you need something closer to actuality because you still have playoff hopes here. You're not in the green banana business anymore here. You want your bananas ripe. You want to be able to peel these guys for the playoffs, okay? No more green bananas here. Thank you very much. So you want something else coming your way.
Great turns of phrase there, Marek. $2.6 million the Devils have right now in cap space, so some money would have to come back, because the Canucks aren't retaining till 29-30 on the Miller.
Maybe a guy like Haula gets put in or something.
What were the other names you were going to mention, Jeff?
Yeah. So there's a couple. I mean, a lot has been made about how Vancouver is having a hard time defending rush, and there are three names that pop to mind, and they won't be cheap. Well, just be blunt. They won't be cheap. Although, Marcus Pettersson in Pittsburgh, and that name has been around for a long time. He's a strict rental. His contract expires at the end of the season. I wonder about, and there are teams that have inquired already. And if you're Craig Conroy, you're sitting back saying, no, not for sale. Meanwhile, drive the price up. We all know what the long-term play for Calgary is. I do, maybe the best example of what Vancouver could use on their back end is Rasmus Andersson. And these two teams have made deals before. I think as far as defending rush, I think that gets addressed right away with someone like Anderson in your lineup. And the other one, this one to me is intriguing. I was having a conversation with someone this morning about it, saying, hey, I do my Friday hits, and we're going to talk about the Vancouver Canucks blue line. Throw a wild card name at me that you think Vancouver could/should be interested here. And this person said to me, Jake Wallman of the San Jose Sharks. And there's this year and next year with Jake Wallman. I think we're all still having a chin scratch about what exactly Steve Yzerman was doing with this deal. Mike Greer robbed the bank and didn't have to wear a mask for this one. We're all scratching our heads about this scenario and what he was able to pull off. And I don't even know that they would want or have any desire to. But again, maybe everyone's for available for trade based on your return. I don't know that San Jose would even want to do it, but I thought that was an interesting name to sort of enter into the conversation. Jake Wallman as a potential trade target for the Vancouver Canucks. So I'll throw Pettersson, Anderson, and Jake Wallman into the mix here on a Friday afternoon.
Attaboy. Another name that you wanted to bring up, just because the Canucks had previous interest here.
Yeah.
Tony DeAngelo was let go by his KHL team. Now, there have been some reports coming out of Russia, which I always take with a grain of salt, that, he was all about himself and getting his own points for his own bonuses and not getting along with his teammates. I may take these reports with fewer grains of salt, given the individual involved here who hasn't always gotten along. But he's a free agent. Free to sign with anyone immediately, Jeff?
He's free to say. He's again, as you point out, Matt, a couple summers ago, before he went to Carolina, he was down the road with the Vancouver Canucks, and the only reason, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's salient for this conversation. That is, there has been interest there previous. I don't know that there is now. The one thing that I would wonder about, like if I'm Tony DeAngelo and I'm coming back and I want to see if there's anything there for me in the NHL, I wonder if he would take a PTO, just to show that he could play. And if you're the Vancouver Canucks, like, you're not giving up assets, right?
Right.
Like that's why
the PTO thing with Kessel last year, right? You got your free look at Kessel last year.
What's the harm in having a look? If you're the Vancouver is the one thing that I would, unless you think that it's situation grave and we need to bring in a full timer right now and it's Pettersson or Anderson or Marek's thing about Jake Wallman in San Jose.
Boy.
Maybe you go that way, or do you just maybe you do both and say, like, sure, let's have a look what's under the hood here with Tony DeAngelo.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Wallman, who's having a nice year and is under contract for next year at a reasonable cap number, just over 3. He does have a 10-team no trade list, assuming that Vancouver is not on that list. And the other thing is Greer's got to feel pretty good because he already got a second-round pick with Wallman from Detroit. So, I don't know if a future first-round pick gets it done for Jake Wallman. Getting back on Anderson,
hang on. If it is a future first-round pick, what a beautiful job of asset management by Mike
for
Greer.
No question.
Like holy smokes, absolutely.
But Anderson with Miller as a principal, like, that's got to be plus for Calgary. Like, we've been talking all year that Rasmus Anderson has to be amongst the most valuable trade pieces we have seen in some time when you look at shot, two-way, all situations defenseman on a good contract with size and snarl. Like, he ticks every single box.
And likable.
Yeah. Well, he hates
along with
the Canucks,
everybody.
he mentioned last week, but he groups the Canucks. He hates a lot of teams that are rivals.
On DeAngelo, though, if I had only read the hockey DB of Tony DeAngelo, I'd be all over this. Unfortunately, I've read more on Tony DeAngelo and a dressing room that's already in disarray.
Oh boy,
I don't know that Tony DeAngelo is the recipe.
Having said that, though, like, I do understand what you're saying. But having said that, they went down the road with him before with the same issues in that room.
Yeah. What's your forecast for Brock Boeser here, who was benched last night as well? That was the other thing. I mean, normally that's a headline for us, Jeff.
I know. That second goal that you pointed out, Miller.
Boeser was dreadful last night.
Go look at Boeser on that goal too. Crazy.
Yeah.
What's your forecast for him?
Play it out this season and he ends up somewhere else. I mean, it seems as if like the two sides are too far apart. And like we mentioned last week, I really do wonder if at the end of it, it's a term issue more than anything else. And he ends up, having played his last games with the Vancouver Canucks, and maybe they move him at trade deadline. Or maybe they say, no, he's, the cliche is own rental, and they keep him and they see what they can do in the playoffs. And then they, pick up that cap space for him at the end of the season when he moves off to other pastures. But this one looks like, again, it's coming to a conclusion at some point here with Boeser and the Vancouver Canucks, unless there's some miracle phone call.
Kirill Kaprizov on LTIR yesterday.
Load up
in Minnesota.
The cap space load up.
Well, I mean, that's like the worst kept secret. Like, can you see Brock Boeser in Minnesota? Duh, we all can. Everybody can see Brock Boeser in Minnesota. Yes, I'm very much with you on that one, Blake. Yep, 100%. Yeah, I think. And listen, Minnesota's going to be. They're going to be frisky this offseason too, because this is like kid in a candy store. Like, remember the first time your parents gave you $20 and it felt like it gave you $1 million? That's what Bill Guerin's going to feel
exactly. Like. I'm going to get a slushie. I'm going to get gum. I'm going to get baseball cards. Brock Boeser. Minnesota's not only going to give Brock Boeser a ton of money, they're going to name one of those 10,000 lakes after him. We have to say goodbye here, but just two things in closing.
Okay.
You mentioned Stefan, just to clean up here.
Sure.
You mentioned Stefan Nesson as one of the most improved players in the NHL. I look at box scores every night, and he just continues to jump out at me. What an extraordinary story. He is 31 years old. Yeah. He's a kid who owes his NHL career to Jim Lights and the Dallas Stars building rinks in suburban Metroplex, because he was a Plano, Texas kid, and there were not a lot of first-round picks out of Plano, Texas. When he is now on his 8th organization, 7 if you count New Jersey twice. He's on his 2nd tour with New Jersey, was part of the Bobby Ryan deal from Ottawa to Anaheim. Then he went to Jersey, Pittsburgh, San Jose, Toronto, Carolina, Jersey again, and is having a stellar campaign. And
it's
then,
a great story. It's a great story. It's funny too because I watched him play plenty in the OHL, and I talked to one of his teammates that was with him in the NHL, and I said, like, what's the Nason story? Like, give me the Stefan Nason story. He said he's either incredibly engaged or completely bored. And that was his issue. It was consistency from shift to shift to shift. Sometimes there would be some shifts where, like, this guy is incredible. This guy's going to score 30 goals every year. And then he would follow that shift with, I'm not really interested. I'm just here to wave at the parade. I don't want to get on one of the floats. Like, no thanks. That was the story of Stefan Nason. It was almost becoming the story. Like, everyone was sort of seduced by those shifts that you look at and you say the skill and the size and the toughness, like all of it. Like, yeah, give me that, give me that, give me that. And then he'd follow it up with like 3 dog shifts, and then that would be it.
He had 31 career goals in parts of 8 seasons. He's got 31 over the last 2 years, including 17 this year. And then, forgive me, I was doing the 87 Jays from memory. A few things to clean up there. They lost their last 7, not their last 9.
Okay, very good. Fact check.
The series in between the 2 Detroit series was in Toronto against Milwaukee. Bob Uecker would have called those games.
Oh, man.
It was Larry Herndon, not Chet Lemon, hitting the home run. And Tigers reliever Mike Henneman had 2 wins and a save against the Jays in the final week, taking over from Cy Young award-winning Guillermo Hernandez of a few years previous in the closer's role. I can remember listening to Tom and Jerry call those games because I believe only the Wednesday night game was televised back then. Listening to them and like the dread that was coming into their voices as all of those losses started piling up and the Jays started puking away the division. Anyways, thanks for bringing that up, Mayor.
That was, by the way, that was my 1985. That was my first job working at Versa Foods at Exhibition Stadium selling hot dogs and jumbo Cokes. I was in the bleachers. I was up and down the stairs, and I only took the job just so I could watch Jays games. That was it. I can't remember if I put any money in my jeans. Don't they all? That's it. I just wanted to watch. And I got to see George Bell and Bruce Keeson that year. Ernie Wick got down on one knee with the grand slam. Oh yeah.
There's a big magazine article. Gare Joyce wrote a fall of 1987 piece on Sportsnet. It's still up there. It's a magazine with illustrations and everything. It's worth a read if you're interested
on it.
Yeah.
Was that the year?
I knew if I threw it out, you guys would know it. I mean, I knew what I was doing there. I was just going to lob it out there, and you're going to fill in the blanks.
Was that the year that Bell was upset with media reports leaks in the clubhouse, and he walked in and said, "Who's in here talking behind my neck?"
I don't remember. I mean, I would have been 15 years old.
That was his MVP year. It was 47 home runs, 134 RBI. Oh my God!
On RBI baseball because of that,
Bell.
He was inhuman.
Bell. Yeah. Until next Friday. Thank you.
What an outfield! I know an outfield. All right, thanks, gentlemen. Talk in 7 days.